In the late afternoon of December 12, 1985, a 2-year-old girl was found standing at the entrance of a Kmart branch in Spanaway, Washington. She was so quiet and appeared stunned and confused. Her parents were nowhere to be found, so just like any other child, she was taken to the local hospital for a checkup and then moved to a temporary foster home. For department store employees and childcare professionals, this incident was nothing out of the ordinary. A lot of parents get separated from their young children while shopping. They probably thought that soon the little girl would be reunited with her family. Little did they know that this event would lead to the discovery of a horrific attack associated with a certain tube sock killer. If you love forest camping, this will send shivers down your spine. The tube sock killer has only been active for just around 4 months in the Mineral, Washington area. Within that short period, the murderer was able to end the lives of 4 victims, or maybe more. They just haven't been found yet. So, when the child who was lost at the local Kmart was deposited in a foster home, authorities started to look for her parents. Her face was published in the newspapers and featured in local news broadcasts. 3 days later, a woman named Louise Conrad turned up. She identified the child as her granddaughter, Crystal. The moment Mrs. Conrad saw the little girl's face in the papers, she knew right then and there that something was wrong. Instead of calling the authorities first, she contacted the child's parents, but they were not answering her calls. For the concerned grandma, it doesn't make any sense. Why would they leave their daughter alone? She reached out to child care and hurried to meet her granddaughter. It was an emotional reunion. According to Mrs. Conrad, when Crystal saw her, she immediately placed her arms around her and said, "Grandma." She didn't want to let go. When she asked Crystal where her parents were, all she could tell was, "Mommy is in the trees. Mommy is in the trees," over and over again. Her response sounded so insignificant, yet haunting at the same time. It's like a riddle that needed to be solved for the police to get to the location of her parents. At one point, you would wonder if she really did answer the question correctly. At the end of the day, the child is too young to talk and recount her experience. Investigators said that she was not nearly verbal enough to give any information. Good thing that Mrs. Conrad was able to remember that maybe, just maybe, Crystal was referring to the woods near Nisqually River, where her father used to go when installing animal traps. She told authorities that Crystal's father was an animal trapper and that he loved camping in that part of the forest. Alongside that, she gave the police the family's address so they can start the investigation as soon as possible. At this point, it was clear that Crystal's parents, Mike Reimer and Diana Robertson, were missing. As they await information regarding their whereabouts, Crystal was put in her maternal grandmother's care. The same weekend, a huge search operation was conducted in the same remote site where Mike used to set traps. They scoured the place by foot and air for 2 or 3 hours, but there was nothing. They didn't even see his truck. There was deep snow everywhere, making the search even more difficult. Realizing that finding them was impossible amidst the cold weather, they eventually abandoned the search efforts. Christmas and New Year came and went. No sign of Mike and Diana. 2 months later, on February 18, 1986, a man was walking his dog in a logging road near Nisqually River, Washington State Route 7 in Mineral, Washington, when he saw an abandoned pickup truck partially covered in snow. Curiosity got into him. He probably thought that it was weird for someone to discard a vehicle near that far-off part of the woods. First, he looked around, checking if the owner was nearby. When he realized that it was really deserted, he walked closer to the truck, enough to have a glimpse inside. That was when he realized that he was in the middle of a possible crime scene. He saw that there was blood on the passenger seat. Also near the truck was the body of a woman, half buried in snow. He immediately reported his discovery to the police. When the authorities arrived, a gruesome crime scene was revealed. The woman that was lying not far from the truck was Diana Robertson, Crystal's mom. Investigators realized that it's true. Crystal was correct when she said that her mother was in the trees. She was really among the trees. They just weren't able to see her in the previous weeks because of the deep snow. She had been stabbed 17 times and a tube sock was wrapped around her neck. However, there was no sign of Mike, Crystal's father, and Diana's boyfriend. Why was she there, and why did her child end up miles away from her body? Was Mike her killer? Did Mike drive Crystal to the department store because he didn't have the heart to kill her? Police don't release 100% of the case details all the time, but in this specific incident, we know that 3 significant pieces of evidence may help lead to the perpetrator. Surely there was more, but they were already wiped out by the time and the winter season. The bloodstains found at the truck's front seat seemed promising, but forensic tests weren't able to match it to any specific person. The cold weather sustained its fast deterioration. It wasn't even sound enough for them to retrieve its blood type. The only thing that they were able to prove was that it was human blood. The second important piece of evidence was the manila envelope recovered from the truck's windshield with the words, "I love you, Diana." Diana's family strongly believed that the note was written by Mike Reimer. According to the grandmother, some of the cards Mike wrote for Diana on different occasions were in her possession. She knew very well that they were signed in the same way. The thing was that the FBI's analysis of the handwriting came back inconclusive. If it was written by Mike, did he write it as a goodbye note to this girlfriend? But what if it was positioned there to frame Mike and confuse authorities? The third evidence and most bizarre aspect of the case was the tube sock found on Diana's neck. Remember that she was already stabbed 17 times. Whether she was stabbed first before getting strangled by a tube sock, no one knows but the police. But either way, that's too much. It's overkill. Was it possible that she knew her killer? What if she somewhat wronged him and that the murderer was so inflamed with anger that he thought she deserved to be killed in the cruelest manner? In the first place, why were they in the remote parts of the forest? Here was what happened. On the morning of December 12th, Mike Reimer, his girlfriend Diana, and their daughter Crystal explored the forest area near Tacoma, Washington. Mike drove his family to a breathtaking area often frequented by nature lovers and campers. He parked the truck near Nisqually River and then led the way towards the middle of the woods to look for a Christmas tree. Mike also took this chance to check his animal traps. Mike worked primarily as a roofer, but during the winter months, when there were no roofing jobs, he made extra income as a trapper. As to what occurred while they were at the remote site, no one knew. The police needed to start from somewhere, and they did settle with the most obvious possibility. It had to be Mike. Mike was obviously the killer. But how can that happen? They've been together for years. Diana, at just 21 years old, was a young, loving mom. She had known her 36-year-old boyfriend Mike since she was 17 years old. They even had a child who they loved from the bottom of their hearts. Sounds like an example of great young love. Well, more like tough love. Mike had a history of domestic violence. Darlene Robertson, Diana's sister, said that he frequently beat his girlfriend. He always made it appear that she was the one doing the wrong things, but the truth was, he was the one seeing someone else and doing all the undesirable things. According to her close friends and family members, a few weeks before they headed to the woods, Diana secured a court order keeping Mike from seeing her. She allegedly told her mom that Mike threatened to kill her and that he would easily get away with it. That was an awful situation for a young woman to go through. Although, that's no longer surprising, since thousands of women go through misery at the hands of their partners. Authorities were pretty much sure that Diana was one of those unlucky ladies. However, as Christmas approached, they reconciled. They adored their daughter Crystal too much, and they would do anything just to make her happy. So, that holiday season, they moved back to Mike's home to start anew. Sadly, it seemed like Diana was lured into a trap, just like those poor animals. That's just one angle worth considering. There's still another theory, a substantial one that involved other victims in a different crime. Initially, the police didn't think that there was a possible connection between the two cases. However, they realized that the link between the two brutalities proved inescapable. 4 months earlier, on August 11, 1985, a double murder occurred approximately 15 miles from where Diana's body was discovered. It involved 27-year-old Stephen Harkins and his girlfriend, 42-year-old Ruth Cooper, who, after attending a wedding in Tacoma, decided to have a bit of fun and relax in nature's company. They headed to a forest in Tule Lake, South Pierce Country, to go camping. It didn't end up being an exciting, fun-filled trip though. The two failed to report to their jobs the following day and were immediately reported missing by their families. 4 days later, some hikers passing through the place found Stephen's body in a remote campsite. He was still in his sleeping bag and appeared to have been shot in the head while in deep slumber. Even his dog was gunned down. Ruth's body wasn't found until 2 months later. Her skeletal remains were discovered near a dead-end road 1.5 miles from where Stephen's body was found. Dental records confirm that the remains did belong to Ruth. Her purse was also discovered around 50 feet from where her skull was located. She was found many weeks after the crime took place, so the chance of acquiring evidence that can lead to the murderer was slim. In her neck, though, remained a piece of striking evidence that can be the key to finding her killer. Just like Diana, a tube sock was tied around her neck. Detectives said that the tube sock found on the two victims had been tied with exactly the same type of knot. Was this the work of a serial killer and that same exact person who took the life of Diana Robertson? Did Mike Reimer kill Diana Robertson, Stephen Harkins, and Ruth Cooper? We don't need to be experienced investigators and police officials to realize that the tube sock is more than just evidence. It's most probably the signature of a serial killer. The details surrounding the Mike Reimer, Diana Robertson, and Stephen Harkins, Ruth Cooper cases led detectives to two theories. The first was that Mike Reimer is the serial killer. His tumultuous relationship with his girlfriend was more than enough proof of his violent nature. In fact, Diana supposedly told her mom that Mike once threatened to murder her and that he would easily get away with it. That's no longer surprising, since his domestic violence background wasn't really a secret. For the public and the investigators, he had the makings of a serial killer. He even knew how to effectively set traps in remote regions, far from the trails and the eyes of other humans. With more than 15 years of experience navigating the deep forests of Tacoma, he knew the perfect spots to execute the perfect crimes. There was enough circumstantial evidence to issue a warrant of arrest for Mike Reimer. There was just one big problem. They cannot prove whether he was dead or alive. He just vanished without a trace. Of course, if he is alive, he eventually becomes a suspect. However, if he's already dead, then it is clear that someone else, an unidentified person, was roaming around killing couples in the Washington area. This opened the door to another possibility. The second theory is that the serial killer was going around targeting couples and that he hid Mike Reimer's body to frame him. People who followed the case online were also quick to point out the huge gap between the two couples. Mike and Ruth were 15 years older than their partners Diana and Stephen, respectively. The age gap was an intriguing detail, but did age really play a part in this horrendous crime? The killer wouldn't know this unless he or she were close to the victims. People may look younger or older than their actual years. To each his own aging process. The age gap could just be an odd coincidence or part of the loathsome workings of a serial killer's mind. So yes, this may be the work of an unknown murderer. Years on, the case remains unsolved. People started to lose interest in the case, and many of the detectives who first worked on it retired or got assigned somewhere else. Still, one thing endured. Mike has always been the suspect, wherever he may be. That assumption was shattered in March 2011 when a groundbreaking discovery unfolded. Mike Reimer's skull and jawbone was found by a hiker near the Nisqually River, about a mile from where Diana's body was discovered 25 years earlier. Since very little of him was recovered, they could not determine the cause of his death. What they were able to do, though, was date his remains, and it was in the same time frame as that of Diana. It's still possible that Mike killed his girlfriend, but does that mean that he also drove Crystal to the department store, went back to the forest, and then killed himself? When the police found Diana, there was no sign of Mike's body around. This brings us to the conclusion that he was buried underground during the entire search operations and that he was murdered possibly after or even before Diana. Obviously, he couldn't bury himself. The speculation that he killed Ruth and Stephen also cannot be proven. Were these four people just unlucky enough to come across a murderer who enjoyed hunting couples in the remote forests?